Soma is a complete nerd with no b****s who gets transported to a magical world by the king who wants to sacrifice him in order to make sure his kingdom survives. Soma puts his brain to use and is not only able to save his own life, but also becomes the new king who gets to marry the princess and start his own harem while trying to stop a massive all-out war which is about to happen. Soma is a total nerd who lives with his grandfather in modern-day Japan and is a very realistic person when it comes to planning. This bitchless guy is always studying in the library as he wants to be. One day, when he was in a library, he went over to get a book off the shelf when suddenly a bright light appeared on top of him. He seems to be visibly confused at this occurrence, but before he could do anything, he was sucked inside of it, and the very next moment, he was falling down from the sky in a totally unknown land. He is super scared, thinking that he will die falling from this height, but surprisingly, he lands softly on the ground without any injuries. He shakes the dizziness off and notices that he is surrounded by a bunch of hooded figures looking intently at him. This scares him a bit, but he puts on a brave face and decides to bluff that he is totally in control of the situation. The hooded figures escort him to what looks like a courtroom to him. He looks around and spots people wearing very dated uniforms. Some of them aren't even men, but it looks like they are a mix between animals and humans. The king, who was sitting on the throne up until now, gets up and welcomes him to his kingdom, calling Soma the hero, which confuses him. The king thanks him for answering his call, but this makes Soma mad as he never answered any calls, and he was more or less yanked from his place without his permission and brought here. The king is taken aback and asks him not to be angry at them, as they have an explanation. He explains that he is currently in a world that has witches and wizards, dwarves and elves, knights and dragons that roam the world freely. Some time ago, however, a small void opened in the northern part of their continent, and suddenly a huge horde of demons started coming out of it. All of the surrounding kingdoms started combining their strength to fight against the demons, but it turns out that the demons seem to be innumerable, and no matter how many of them are killed, they always seem to be replaced immediately. But sadly, their kingdom doesn't have inexhaustible manpower, and hence, they cannot keep fighting such a losing battle. Soma looks at the king and tells him that there is no way he's going to fight against the demons. The king seems embarrassed, so one of his ministers comes forward and explains to him that one of the kingdoms, known as the Chaos Empire, is the strongest of them all and has been constantly asking them for monetary support, and if they don't offer monetary support, the empire has threatened them with war. Soma asks the minister about how he is tied up with all of this, and the minister looks down sheepishly and tells him that they have decided to summon a hero and then offer it to that empire, as it is the only way they won't have to pay any money, as they don't have any money. Soma is shocked beyond any measure and blankly looks at the king, who looks embarrassed. He asks the king whether this was the plan to call a goddamn hero to his kingdom, and he nods solemnly. Soma starts thinking about what he could do to escape this situation and realizes that there is no way he can run away from here, as he will probably be caught very easily, and it might become troublesome for him. He decides that he will deal with this situation logically and realistically. He looks at the king and asks him whether he knows what will happen to him once he turns him over to the Chaos Empire. The king shakes his head and says that he has no idea what would happen to him, which is definitely not what Soma wanted to hear. He asks him whether he at least knows that he will be safe when turned over to them, or if they will immediately kill him for some reason or other. They don't answer that question, which makes him realize that he cannot leave it up to luck and decide to take matters into his own hands. He looks at the king and asks him about the last time a hero was summoned in this kingdom, and the minister replies that the last time a hero was summoned was 500 years ago, and since then, people have been trying but can't summon anyone. Soma immediately presses the matter and asks them what will happen after they turn him over. Will they stop demanding things from them afterwards? This shuts everyone up as they realize that they cannot keep summoning heroes to hand them over. The king looks confused, and Soma decides that this is the moment that he has to use to get out of this problem. He looks at them and tells the king that he will help them get out of this situation as he is the chosen one, the hero who will lead their kingdom to revolution. Everyone is shocked at this, but Soma tells the king that he is going to check all of the financial records and set everything straight so that their kingdom can start generating more money and doesn't collapse under its own weight. Everyone rejoices at this amazing speech, and the king decides to give it a shot. They all go inside the room, and Soma realizes that he doesn't really have any plans as of now, but decides to simply take the account of all the finances from the king and the minister. So for 3 days and 3 nights continuously, they discussed all the finances for the kingdom, and he finally is able to come up with some sort of solution. The next day, they all gather in front of a massive audience, where Soma is very sleep deprived and looks like she can sleep at any moment. The king stands beside him and declares that he, the king, has decided that Soma is more fit to rule the kingdom, and starting now, he is transferring the kingship to Soma. Everyone is shocked at this revelation, but none more than Soma, who had no idea this was coming. On top of that, the king proudly declares that to make his claim to the throne even stronger, he has decided to marry his only daughter, Liz, to Soma. Just like that, within moments, Soma's entire life was changed, and he was given the task of changing the lives of all the subjects residing in his kingdom. He sits down in his chambers and starts working on a room full of paperwork without any breaks or sleep because of the sheer volume of work. Suddenly, he hears the door open and a beautiful young woman dressed in a military outfit barges in without saying anything. Soma is so tired that he doesn't even look up from his work and asks her whether she is a learned person and knows how to read and write. This takes Liz by surprise, who heatedly answers that she's a very learned person. Soma then asks her some basic math questions without looking them up, and when she is able to answer them, he asks her to help him deal with this paperwork. Liz walks up to him and announces that he is talking to the daughter of the former king. This makes Soma look up from his paperwork, and he asks her why she is wearing a military outfit. She explains that she always had a knack for combat and wanted to help on the front lines, so she enrolled herself in the military. She asks him what he did with her father, as there is no way her father would give up kingship. Soma lets out a deep sigh and tells her that he was summoned to this weird place and he only wanted to escape being sent to the Chaos Kingdom, but her father got impressed by him and made him the king. He reassures her, however, that it won't be for long, as he doesn't want to be king and just wants to go back to his own place. He tells her that he will stay in this kingdom for 2 or 3 years, till the kingdom regains its footing and gets more stable financially. He also tells her not to worry about the engagement, as she can cancel it anytime she wants to. Liz seems impressed after hearing about his humility and decides to talk to him more cordially. He explains to her that he is already working on getting more money and has sold all the useless jewels and treasures from the kingdom's vault, as their country needs food that people can eat and not jewels that are locked in some vault right now. Liz seems horrified and tells him that a lot of those treasures are ancient artifacts that are basically extremely precious. Soma calms her down by showing her a list of items that he has sorted and how he hasn't sold any national heritage items or any dark magic items. He's only sold basic jewelry in gold and silver. Liz seems to be more relaxed now and asks him about his next plans. Soma replies that he isn't going to send money to the Chaos Kingdom as of now, as the people living in this kingdom are still hungry and need something to eat. Liz suggests that instead of sending the money straight to the Chaos Empire, he can use it to strengthen their own military. Soma thinks for a moment and realizes that she is right. If they give the money to the Chaos Empire, they will just keep asking for more, but if they invest it in their own military, they might be able to stand up to them and retake their position. Slowly but surely, Soma starts understanding how this world works. He took an extensive tour of the kingdom and got to know that it has a lot of hidden properties that he wasn't aware of. From the looks of it, the kingdom looks like a very old school area, with no modern techniques or tools being used, but if you take a closer look, you will realize that this kingdom has a lot of the modern luxuries hidden in a different form. For example, the light bulb is a pretty modern invention that has solved the problem of illumination forever, but in this world there is no electricity, much less a light bulb. Surprisingly, every street has a bunch of street lamps, and even at night, houses are illuminated. This is because of the special magic that the people of this continent possess. They can create light, heat, and water at will, which comes in very handy when you think about it. He is also taken by one of the priests, who tells him to put his hand over a stupid-looking statue, claiming that if he has any affinity for magic, he will know immediately. He puts his hand over the stupid statue, and suddenly he loses himself in reality and starts seeing a bunch of bright light spots against a black background. But he remembers that he hasn't taken any LSD, so he quickly realizes that it must be the work of magic. When he comes to, the priest tells him that he does have magical affinity and that he should go and practice some magic, as it will make him better at it. He goes back to his chambers, where he has hired a bunch of working personnel who are able to read and write to do some paperwork. He himself sits down on the chair and starts working, but before that, he is able to play around with his magic. He transfers his consciousness into 3 pens, which immediately start doing paperwork on their own. He tries with a 4th pen, but doesn't work, making him realize that for now, 3 objects are his limit. While doing the paperwork, Liz enters the chamber to check up on him and is surprised to see the magical pens. She asks him about it, as she has never really seen this kind of magic, but Soma tells her that he has created it just now. Liz has no trouble believing this, but before she could ask anything else, he asked her to get down to work and put a ton of paperwork on her as well. They all keep working for countless hours before Soma looks up through his baggy eyes to see that all of them have fallen asleep out of exhaustion. He walks over to Liz, who is also sleeping on the couch very cutely, and observes her for a moment before pushing some hair out of her head lovingly. Liz, however, is used to creeps like him and immediately wakes up, asking him what he was doing. Soma tells her that he just came to see whether she was sleeping or not and nothing else. The next morning, he tells her that he wants to show her something, and they both get on a horse. Liz is surprised. As usual, a man is supposed to take the reins, but Soma is sitting on the back of the horse, holding her waist as tightly as possible, as he doesn't know how to drive a horse. They both go on a surprisingly romantic ride, which ends near a giant field covered in white. They get off and Soma walks alongside Liz and shows her the fields, informing her that their entire country is filled with cotton fields like these, which are borderline useless. He explains that once cotton used to be a very valuable commodity, so all the farmers decided to grow it on a huge scale, so they could export it and earn a lot of money. This resulted in the entire kingdom starting to produce cotton instead of other agricultural crops. That would have been fine, as with the money earned, they can easily import food, but the problem arose when other countries also started growing cotton, leading to an increase in supply high while the demand wasn't that high, leading to a cotton crash where their prices were down to earth and they were worth nothing. This is the reason why their country is suffering through such a bad famine and they have nothing to eat at all. Liz looks sad, as she was supposed to be one of the leaders of this country and yet she had no idea about this entire fiasco. She apologizes to him, but he tells her that she shouldn't apologize to anybody but help him bring back the country to its former glory. They go back to the dining hall and start having breakfast together when a man called Ark introduces himself as the leader of the guards. He sits down with them and asks Soma if there is anything he could do. Soma very frankly replies that not many people in this country are useful, as most of them have no idea what they are doing. He tells him that he is in serious need of more trained manpower and people with specialized skills. Ark bows down and tells him that he will see what he can do before taking his leave. Liz and Soma later have tea, where Soma suddenly gets an idea and asks Liz whether they have any kind of broadcasting device. Liz has no idea what this man is talking about, so he tries to explain what kind of device he is talking about, and Liz suddenly exclaims that they have a device like that for public announcement. This will be perfect for Soma's plan, so he tells her to take him to the device as soon as possible. He explains to her that he's going to recruit a workforce from the general public. Liz tells him that they already do it, which surprises Soma, and he asks her how they select people. She replies that they have a series of written examinations and people who pass all of those are taken into the castle as workers. Soma tells her that this strategy is highly inefficient as they are probably missing out on extremely talented individuals. He asks her how high the literacy rate in their kingdom is, to which she replies that it is around 30%. He looks at her and tells her that just written exams cannot tell you how talented an individual is. It is the aptitude of the individual that is important, not how literate he is. He tells her that this set of exams must be enforced by high-ranking nobles, who have the influence and the money to send their children to the best academies to get them educated and put them in positions of power in the court. It is classic nepotism. She is shocked at this revelation and asks him what he proposes to do. He tells her that she will know soon. The next day, he stations himself in front of the broadcasting device alongside Liz and starts broadcasting to the entire kingdom. He addresses his subjects and tells them that he's going to give them a very good opportunity to completely turn their lives around, grabbing everyone's attention. He tells them that he is proposing an open round for people with very high aptitude, a specialization, or any kind of skill that might be helpful. He tells them that nothing else matters. They can be literate or illiterate, wealthy or dirt poor. All that matters are their skills, strengths, and aptitude. The next day comes around and everyone gathers inside the court to witness the new people who will be chosen directly by the king. Soma sits on his throne with Liz by his side and the selection begins. He notices that only 5 people have nominated themselves for the selection exam. All of them bow in front of him as soon as Ark introduces the king. All of them bow down apart from a tall, dark-skinned girl called Aisha. She claims that she is from the clan of warrior elves, and they don't bow in front of anyone to whom they haven't pledged their lives. Ark gets mad and tells her to bow down immediately, but Soma stops him and tells him to let it go. He quickly uses his special magic to remotely rid everything about these elves and realizes that they are very well known and feared for their combat prowess and are supposed to be excellent warriors. She tells him that she is one of the best warriors in her clan, making her one of the best, if not the best, warriors in the entire kingdom. She then asks Soma whether he could help her. He is taken aback and doesn't know what to say, but the elf continues telling him that for some reason, the blessed forest where they live has been deteriorating at a very rapid rate for no reason. According to her, she and her clansmen take very good care of the forest, but even then it seems to be dying on them and they have no idea why it is happening. She also adds that she has heard that Soma is a very intellectual person and might be able to devise a strategy to save the forest. Soma looks confused, but he quickly starts thinking and asks whether they are thinning the forest or not. Aisha looks at him blankly and asks what he means by that. Soma realizes that these techniques must be comparatively modern and explains to her that when a forest is left to grow on its own, oftentimes the older trees end up covering all of the canopy, resulting in no sunlight penetrating to the forest floor, because of which no seedlings or saplings are able to grow. The entire forest floor dies and there are no young plants to replace any older trees that might fall. This also leaves the area as a whole susceptible to erosion and other massive natural problems. Suddenly, Aisha completely bows down in front of him and tells him that she is pledging her entire life to Soma and is ready to fight for him and die for him. She tells him to please accept her as his bodyguard and tells him to help them restore the forest. Soma graciously accepts her, and the next girl that comes up for trial turns out to be a beautiful maid called Juna. She is supposed to be one of the most beautiful people that exist in the kingdom, and she is supposed to be the best singer that ever existed. According to the minister, Juna has descended from a long line of mermaids who used to be extremely beautiful and used to wreck ships by swaying the sailors in the wrong directions when they followed their beautiful voice. Soma realizes that if this is true, then singing should be in her blood. He calls her forth and asks her to sing a song for everyone, as it is being broadcast around the kingdom. She looks up at him and tells him that she has no problem doing that, but most of her songs are sad and melancholic. Soma asks her whether she could learn a song by heart after just listening to it once, and she says yes. Soma quickly flicks out his phone and gives her an earphone to hear one of the songs that he has on it. She seems to like the song and it passes the vibe check. She returns the earphones to Soma, and everyone seems surprised by the new device that Soma just whipped out of his pants. She then gets ready and starts singing the song very beautifully, and and after the performance is over, everyone applauds her excellent singing. Soma tells her that he is really impressed by her ability to remember a song by heart after hearing it once and singing it perfectly. The next person to come forward is a fat idiot named Poncho. He seems to be very nervous and is sweating like a pig. He gets up and tries to address the king, but falls after tripping over his own leg like an idiot. He then gets up and explains that his special ability is that he is a glutton and has tried almost every dish that this country has to offer. He expected Soma to laugh at his face, but surprisingly enough, Soma rushes down to shake his hand and tells him that he was waiting for someone like him to come along and that he is really happy to hire him. He tells Poncho that at a time when the entire kingdom is suffering through famines, abilities like his are of great importance. This really boosts Poncho's confidence and he starts crying, saying that all his life he has been called a fatso, which to be fair, he is. Soma, however, thinks differently and tells him that he is the one who will be responsible for bringing their country out of famine and back to prosperity. The next candidate turns out to be an emo guy who walks up to Soma and introduces himself as Kaz. He tells Soma that all the while Soma was judging the others, he had been judging him. He is supposed to be one of the best minds in all of the kingdom and is a fanatic about reading every kind of literature you can get your hands on. He is a very knowledgeable person, which Soma immediately realizes from the way he talks. He asks Kaz what his decision was and whether he thinks Soma is worthy of being king or not. Kaz replies coolly that all of it came down to one decision that Soma made. It all depended on whether Soma thought Fat was useless or not. If he thought Fatty was useless, he would have failed to be a worthy king as he doesn't know what his kingdom needs the most right now. But surprisingly, he was extremely enthusiastic after the appearance of Fatty. This made him believe that Soma actually had some brains and wasn't just another nobody. In fact, Kaz was so impressed that he asked Soma to be his lieutenant and let him be his right-hand man and advisor. Soma is impressed by Kaz's decision-making abilities and decides to hire him as his advisor. The last person to come forth is a loli called Tomo. She is a wolf girl who is supposed to be able to talk to all the animals of every race. She seems to be very nervous and is hardly speaking for herself. Liz comments that the members of the wolf clan are never seen inside their kingdom, to which Soma replies that she could be a refugee. He asks her to speak up, but she doesn't, and she gets even more scared. Soma decides to descend his throne and walks up to her, crouching down in front of her, and asks her what is wrong. She whispers in his ears that something bad is happening and says something that makes Soma's eye get wide with shock. Soma quickly regains himself and acts like nothing has happened. He gets up and starts walking back to his throne, telling them that they are all dismissed for now, but that he would like to see the lowly in his chambers. Tomo, Liz, Ark, Soma, and the minister all gather around in Soma's chamber, while Tomo is sitting on a couch. Soma asks the rest if they heard what Tomo told him in his ears, but all of them shake their heads, claiming that it was barely a whisper and no one could hear what she actually said. Soma lets out a sigh of relief, knowing that no one else in the kingdom heard it as it was being broadcast all over. He tells the rest that what he is going to tell them must be kept a secret from anyone at all costs, as it might shake the entire kingdom. He finally discloses that the lowly told him that she can not only speak to animals, but she is also able to speak to demons. Liz is totally shocked and tells Soma that it must be some kind of mistake, as demons speak a language that is very different from any of the languages that any of the other races speak, and there is no person alive who is able to decipher their language apart from their own guild. Soma looks at her and tells her that that is the reason why Tomo is probably one of the most important people in the entire country, more so than him. Liz asks Tomo where she learned that she could talk to the demon race, and she replies that some time ago, when she was in the forest, she was just roaming around having fun when she suddenly heard some weird noises and went to investigate. To her horror, she spots a person from the demon race who is short in height and has the head of a dog looking at her. She started screaming for help when the demon told her to shut up in his own language, which she understood, and she stopped screaming, scared of him. The demon gets surprised by this and asks her whether she could understand what he is saying, and she replies yes. Suddenly, they hear a bunch of noises coming, and the demon tells her to run away, as if the rest saw her, they would kill her. That was the last time she saw him as she ran away from the situation. Liz looks at Soma and asks him whether he is planning on some sort of compromise between humans and the demons, as that is borderline impossible, as they have killed countless humans, but in retort, Soma tells her that humans have killed countless demons. He suggests that there is a possibility that this entire war is just a big misunderstanding caused by the fact that none of the parties can understand each other at all. Liz thinks for a bit and realizes that he might be right. He tells Ark that Tomo must be given royal level security immediately, and that he must make sure that she is kept safe. The minister, however, tells them that this will only bring more attention to her, as it would be very weird for a poor girl like Tomo to have royal guards protecting her at every turn. Soma thinks about it, realizes that he is right, and starts thinking about what could be done. The minister suggests that he could adopt Tomo as her daughter, and that should solve the problem, but then realizes that he has to marry someone before he can adopt her, so Soma suggests Liz's father adopt Tomo, which will make it normal for her to have royal protection at all times. Tomo, however, looks at them and interrupts, telling them that she already has a family who is living in the refugee camp and she is not leaving them. Soma smiles at her and tells her that obviously when she is adopted, Tomo's parents will become relatives to the king and will start living here at the castle alongside her. She lets out a yelp of joy and thanks them for everything that they have been doing for her. Later, while Soma was chilling around in Liz's room, it was brought to his attention that Poncho was back from his quest, and he immediately went to meet him alongside Liz. Liss. They all sit down and Pancho thanks Soma for letting him use his royal wyvern, which made it very easy and fast to collect everything he wanted. The next dish that Pancho brings forth horrifies every single one of them. It turns out to be a slime monster. They all seem disgusted, but Pancho wears an apron and starts rolling out the slime flat on the countertop and cutting them into small noodle-like slices before he boils them in water alongside salt and adds a couple of vegetables and some stock. The finished product seems unappetizing to the rest of them, but Soma comments that the dish looks like ramen from his world and sits down to eat. He takes a bite out of it, is pleasantly surprised to know that it even tastes like ramen, and starts slurping noisily. Slowly, the rest of them also tried it and started enjoying it. Finally, their broadcast ends with that, and it turns out to be wildly successful, as soon every single eatery in the area started serving all of the meals that they showcased, and soon they also started mixing things together to create new and exciting meals. He gets called to the throne room by one of the guards, who tells him that the Prime Minister is insisting on an audience with the king, so Soma goes inside the courtroom. There he finds Kaz and the Prime Minister both bowing down in front of him. He tells them to get up and speak their minds. The Prime Minister tells him that he feels that he should follow the former king's example and step down from his post to give the new blood a chance to shine and make the situation better by dealing with them with new techniques instead of following the old school method, as it doesn't seem to be working. Soma seems to be very surprised at this sudden resignation and asks him about his successor, as they need a Prime Minister who is as smart as him and as wise. The minister, however, tells Soma not to worry, as he had taken Kaz as his apprentice and believes that he is ready to take the post of Prime Minister and can do excellent work in the future. Soma looks at Kaz, who is standing there, and realizes that he might very well be the perfect candidate for the job. He accepts the minister's resignation and appoints Kaz as the new Prime Minister. Kaz looks up at Soma and thanks him before telling him to take the entire day off, as he has been working non-stop, and if he keeps working like this, he will get burnt out, leading to the decline of productivity in the ones around him. At first, Soma seems reluctant to take the day off, as he believes there is a lot of work to be done, but Kaz tells him that he needs to take the day off no matter what, and he can do the rest of the work the next day. Soma decides to follow his advice and arranges a date with Liss, with Aisha escorting them. Liss, at first, seems shocked at the fact that Soma is taking it off and asks him whether he is okay. Soma tells her that everything is fine and that he just wants to relax for an evening. Liss tells him that they shouldn't go out as the king and queen. She whips out a bunch of military school uniforms and hands them over to him while wearing one herself. They get Aisha as protection and then go inside the city. After roaming for a while, they decide to pay Juna a visit in her cafe and sit down in a booth to have some relaxing snacks. While relaxing on their seats and talking about the kingdom, they overhear a pretty loud conversation coming from the adjoining table, which is occupied by a fox girl and a red-haired guy. They seem to be having a heated argument, and they are so loud that Soma can't help but overhear their entire conversation. The fox girl is named Keed, and the guy is called Hal. They start talking again, and Hal tells Keed that he doesn't trust the new king at all, as he himself seems to be a very young and inexperienced person, so why should he follow someone who is around his age and probably less experienced on the battlefield? Keed, however, tells him to shut up and tells him that the new king seems to be a formidable person in terms of intelligence and strategy, and is doing really good work. Hal, however, seems to have young blood and only wants war so he can prove himself in a battle and earn the respect of his peers. He tells her that he plans to go over to the Duke of Carmen and join his army. Cade seems horrified and tells him to never say that again, as the Duke of Carmen is in open rebellion against the new king for no reason. Hal, however, shouts at her that he will do as he pleases, and he doesn't believe the new king is fit to be anything. At that point, Soma walks over to their table and asks Hal straight up why he doesn't like the new king. Hal looks up at him and asks him who the hell he is, but Keed seems to recognize Soma as soon as she sees him and gets very flustered. They all sit down at a different table and start talking again. Hal again tries to get in Soma's face, asking him who he thinks he is, but Aisha immediately grabs his hand, twisting it before grabbing his face in her palms and crushing it. Soma tells her to let him go, as that should be enough, while Keed looks at him, scared that Hal will get hurt. Soma then decides to quit playing and looks at Hal before asking him whether he still doesn't recognize him. Hal immediately realizes that Soma is the king himself, and quickly the tone of his voice changes. Soma asks him why he wants to go over to the Duke of Carmen, but Hal doesn't say anything out of fear. Soma looks at him and tells him that he will not tell Hal to stay with him, and he can and should do as he pleases. If he wants to go over to the Duke of Carmen, he should definitely do so, because you can't force anyone to follow you as they do so themselves. Soma, however, plays a mental game with him as he understands the underlying feelings of both Hal and Keed. He tells him that he needs to understand that once he is on the opposite side, he will have to fight against Keed, and if he decides to avoid coming into a head-to-head battle with her, someone else will, and if she gets injured, he will not be allowed by his army to protect her. Even if she is dying and could be saved, he will not be allowed by his army to do so, and they will consider it treason. Hal gets into silent thinking mode and thinks long and hard about it before deciding that he doesn't want to go on the opposite side and fight against Soma or Keed. Soma is glad to know that and thanks him before taking his leave. The next day, he sits down with Liss for tea and explains to her that he's getting good with his dark magic and can now control 4 inanimate objects alone. Before she could say anything, however, he was called to the courtroom because the head of the prestigious Magna House had come to meet him and request his attendance. Soma immediately goes over to meet with them and finds Hal Hal, who seems to have gotten many injuries on his face. Glaive and Keed all present there, bowing their heads. He sits down on the throne, and Glaive immediately starts apologizing to Soma, telling him that he had no idea that Hal said all the things that he said and was only informed by Keed later. He tells Soma that he has disciplined his son and requests that he not take very strict actions against him. He promises that Soma has the unwavering support of the Magna family, and they will always stand beside him in all circumstances. Soma thanks him for his loyalty and tells him that he doesn't intend to punish Hal, and it seems like Glaive has punished him enough. He tells Glaive that he's going to take Keed in as one of the mages in his royal guard and also make Hal an officer in his royal army, so they can stay close and support each other. Several days later, finally, the bulk of the paperwork has been completed, and the remaining paperwork can be done by using Soma's dark magic, so we shouldn't need any more manpower now. He calls in a meeting with everyone who has been working with paperwork for the entire duration, and once they assemble, he gives them a magnanimous speech about how they are the real treasure of the kingdom, and just because of them, he can start working on the next project, which can ensure the long-term survival of the entire kingdom, and can even result in the food shortage problem being solved. He tells them to take an entire week off for their amazing work. He tells them that he would have paid them extra money for everything that they did, but the kingdom is short on money right now, so instead, he tells them to go into the royal wine cellar, which holds the most amazing and deeply flavored vintage wine. He tells them that they can take an entire bottle each for themselves and do whatever they want with it. They can sell it or drink it. It's up to them. The entire group of men rejoices at this, thanks Soma for their generosity, and rushes off to the wine cellar. Liz asks him whether it was advisable for him to give them a week off from work, as they still have a bunch of things to take care of. Soma tells her to chill out for a bit, as the work is going at a great pace. He tells her that he plans to create a port on the shore of one of the villages, which will be a very strategic destination, boost trade in the kingdom, and create a trading town in the place where the village was, giving employment to a bunch of people. He tells her that ships from any other country will have to pay taxes and tolls in order to trade in their kingdom, and this will reduce the amount of illegal trade done beneath their noses. Apart from that, he will put low taxes on any ship that has arrived at the port to trade food crops at low prices, which will reduce the problem of food shortages in the country. He explains to her that everything depends on supply and demand, and right now, the demand for food crops is at its highest, whereas the supply is down to zero. The next day, Soma, Liz, and Aisha go to the small village where the construction has to be done. Ark is already there and has set up tents for everyone. He welcomes Soma, and when he asks whether there have been any issues with the construction, Ark replies that many of the village elders are strongly advising against building a port on the shore of their village at any cost. When he asks for the reason for this disagreement, Ark replies that the elders believe in a very old legend that says that if anything is built in that area, the water gods will destroy the entire region by sending a giant monster made of water that swallows everything. Soma seems interested and asks Ark to take him to the elders who said that. Ark takes him to one of the houses where Soma meets up with one of the elders, and they sit down to talk. The elder again advises Soma that if he builds his port over there, the water gods will definitely take their revenge and destroy the entire region. Soma asks him when the water gods destroyed anything and how they knew it was coming. The elder replies that it happened when his grandfather used to live here. According to the legend, just before the sea monster arrives, the ground starts shaking from its footsteps, and after a while, the monster arrives from the sea and gulps down anything in its way, destroying everything that they hold dear. Soma thinks about it, decides to call it a day, and heads back to his castle. He calls Kaz and Ark into his chambers, where they discuss this predicament. Kaz looks at Soma and asks him whether he believes in the myth, but Soma replies that obviously he doesn't believe in a sea monster, but what he believes in is that myths are always grounded in some truth. He tells them that he has decided to change the place for construction, and that he will be marking out the entire area, which the villagers believe is cursed. Kaz cannot believe his ears and asks him whether he is afraid of some mythical sea god. Soma replies that he is obviously not worried about a sea god, but he believes that what people are calling a sea monster is a tsunami, and when they say they feel the earth rattle from its footsteps, they are misunderstanding it, as it must be an earthquake. He believes that the area must be very susceptible to a tsunami after an earthquake and decides to think ahead and not create a port that is very disaster prone. Soma's construction plans kick off and Hal is exhausted from all the manual labor, so he begins to complain bitterly, asking Keed why the Forbidden Army has anything to do with road construction. Katie tells him to shut it and return to work, with a clear warning that he should dare not call her by her name because she's technically his boss. She then explains that the reason why the army is doing most of the construction work is that there are so many roads to construct, and there's lack of manpower, so the only way to make significant progress would be to include them on the project. At lunch, Hal tastes a delicious burger that was made by Soma, and Katie tells him that the fresh vegetables in the burger came from a nearby village, all thanks to a newly constructed road. She further explains that the roads are contributing to a decrease in food prices because there's now increased supply, and Hal is surprised by their king's commendable foresight. Just then, Soma walks in with Liz, surprising the both of them, and Hal immediately stands up to salute the king, but he orders him to stop acting so formal and to call them by his name because he's happy to have found a guy his age to talk freely with. As they walk on the new roads, Soma explains the process of road construction to Liz, who has never seen how they are built. He tells her the raw materials used in making roads, shows her the street lamps which are powered by some luminous luminescent moss plants for nighttime illumination, and the warding trees which were planted to temporarily protect the village against the influx of wild animals. Suddenly, a messenger bird interrupts their discussion and delivers a letter to Aisha. In the letter, her father informs her about a deadly landslide which swallowed half of their village, causing many to be unaccounted for. Aisha is visibly disturbed and calls out to Soma, but he approaches the situation by reasoning calmly. Immediately, he instructs Ki to mobilize a group inclusive of herself to serve as the first rescue team that will go with him to the Dark Elves' village. He briefly comforts Aisha, but tells her that instead of crying at a time like this, she should brace herself up to accompany them to her village, since they were all foreigners and needed directions. Finally, he tells Liz to hurry to the palace, mobilize another rescue team, and tell Hakia to send relief packages to the Dark Elves. Soma asks Aisha how long it will take to reach her village, and she says it will take them 2 days, using a normal military march. Now he is deeply worried about the time of their arrival, explaining that if they allow a 3-day period to relapse between the occurrence of the disaster and the arrival of the rescue team, the death toll will be greatly increased. Like an answered prayer, one of their strange rhinos runs by, and Soma gets the idea to use them in transporting his rescue team to Aisha's village while he goes with the royal carriage. They finally arrive at the village in the evening, and Aisha's father begins to hail the king and then introduces himself as Woden, but Soma tells him to skip the formalities for a better time and asks for an explanation of the current situation. Woden tells Soma that 100 lives were claimed by the incident and 40 people are yet to be accounted for. Soma tells him to compile a list of the missing people, and each person's name will be struck off the list once they are found. He also tells Woden to have someone watch the mountain for movements in case another landslide occurs while they're on their rescue mission. To accomplish this, Aisha offers to play Watch Liddy, and her father is comfortable with her presence there because she knows the forest like the back of her palm. After the discussion, Soma addresses his search and rescue team, encouraging them to put their road construction skills into good use, as they will need to excavate the land in order to thoroughly search for the missing people. When they start digging, Soma suddenly stops and runs towards a fallen tree trunk, saying he can hear the voices of people, but Hal is confused because he can't hear anything. However, when Hal later digs the area, he is shocked to see a human hand, so he drags the trunk away, and the person is pulled from the ground. Hal is surprised that Soma could tell that someone was buried there, so Soma shows him a wooden mouse that was carved for him to find missing people in places that were too tight for his rescue team to squeeze into. Soma controlled these mice using his magic by sharing a part of his consciousness with them, just as he did with the pens and the dummy. Eventually, the search is concluded and all the villagers have been accounted for, so Woden thanks Soma for his timely intervention, even though, unfortunately, a number of lives were lost. Suddenly, one of Woden's daughters comes in to say that the princess just arrived with the second rescue team, but a man crying in the corner says it is too late. Soma explains that even though it is late, there were other activities being performed by the rescue team, such as tending to the wounded and reconstructing damaged buildings. Yet this man tells him that all their efforts will still not bring back the dead, but Woden immediately interrupts him and tells him to be quiet, before explaining to Soma that the young man was his younger brother Rob, who had lost his wife to the disaster, and that his only daughter was currently in a critical condition. Rob cries bitterly because he had protected the forest with so much dedication, so he couldn't understand why it had killed his wife. Woden comforts him and tells him to mourn his loss without putting the blame on anyone. Later, Aisha tells Soma that Rob was one of those who had opposed the thinning of trees that he earlier proposed and wonders if that might have contributed to the landslide. Soma explains that the disaster was merely a case of bad luck in addition to the high frequency of rainfall. As they head back to the palace, Liz apologizes for being unable to do anything helpful, but Soma says that he feels more useless because he should have planned for disasters like this ahead of time. He also tells her that he regrets being completely focused on fixing the food shortage problem, that he has paid no attention to other important matters. Days later, Juna checks in on Soma and finds him surrounded by a lot of papers on his bed, so she tells him that Liz had complained and is worried about his unhealthy sleep habits. Soma says that it is because his mind has been preoccupied with a lot of things, so she walks to his bed, sits beside him, and asks him to lie down. As he does, she places a palm over his forehead and caresses it lovingly, telling him that it is understandable if he doesn't want to look weak to the princess, but he can call her whenever he feels worn out. To her surprise, Soma is already fast asleep, so Juma smiles and sings sweetly to him while he sleeps. Meanwhile, an argument ensues between the leaders of the dukedoms. A lion-headed man called Duke Carmen insists on overthrowing Soma as king because he is unfit to rule their kingdom. The Duchess Excel is confused by this, commenting on how much Soma has done for their land, but Carmen says that Soma has been neglecting important matters and firing all their loyal service chiefs in the name of combating corruption. The Duke has no intention of ruling the kingdom himself and only wants the former king reinstated because of his loyal commitment to the king. The other Duke is named Castor, and he is also willing to rebel against Soma and is clamoring for war before Soma gains the affection of everyone. Excel warns them both that other kingdoms like Amagonia would want to use their rebellion against Soma to attack the kingdom, but Castor said that Amagonia was willing to send reinforcements against Soma. The Duchess is not convinced by their offer because she believes that they sent a similar offer to Soma as well because they want to cause confusion in order to attack Elfrieden when their soldiers are all in battle. Suddenly, Castor's daughter named Carla burst into the room and declared that if her father was fighting fighting Soma, she would fight by his side no matter the consequences. Gaius, the mischievous ruler of Amadonia, is glad to hear that Carmen has accepted his invitation to go against Soma, calling him a foolish old man because he is going to cause confusion by sending Carmen reinforcements to fight Soma and sending Soma reinforcements to fight against Carmen, just as Lady Excel had suspected. His son, Prince Julius, backs him up, but his daughter, Princess Aurora, is totally not in support of their plan and only envies the land of Elfrieden, which keeps flourishing by the hour. At the palace, Soma consults Hakia about a proposed plan to use violence in order to protect their kingdom. Soma is originally against the employment of cruel measures, but his grandfather's final words ring in his ears, so he chooses to protect those whom he now considers his family. With a decisive tone, Soma orders that they kick off their plan to subjugate. On the other hand, Gaius orders his army to invade the Elfrieden territory, specifically the grainy city of Altamura, while he assumes that Soma is fighting against the dukes. Gaius says that it is high time they regain the land that was stolen from their ancestors 50 years ago, but before he finishes his wonderful speech, a minister, Colbert, comes running and interrupts him. Colbert bows and tells him not to begin a war because he would plunge his people into starvation, but Gaius walks haughtily and kicks the poor guy on his face. Still, the minister reminds him that they are under the Mankind Act because they signed a treaty. Gaius and his son are too stubborn to listen to Colbert, so they dismiss him. Colbert comes out looking like he just came out of a boxing ring, and he meets Gaius' daughter on his way, who tells him that she plans to escape the kingdom and that he should get ready just in case things go haywire. Before he knows it, he says goodbye to gravity. Meanwhile, Soma sends for Liz to ask her for a special favor. He is on what we call a video chat with the three dukes. After the introductions, he tells them that if they continue to rebel against him, he would be forced to recognize them as traitors. Excel asks him what his intentions are concerning the duchies, and he says that he only wants to unite their respective armies under his command with no intention of harming them individually. But Castor is against this idea because he fears that it might harbor corruption, so Soma tells him that uniting the armies will give them better chances of winning against their neighboring enemies like Amadonia. And trying to convince Castor that he will not allow corruption to breed under his rule, Soma tells him to come for his head, in the event that he fails and becomes a corrupt king. At the end of their argument, Lady Excel pledges her allegiance and that of her entire army to Soma, but Castor and Carmen stand by their decision, saying that the previous king didn't consult them before handing the throne over to Soma. Castor says that he is not joining forces with Carmen and would rather remain neutral. When Carmen finally speaks, he tells Soma that he remains solid on his decision because he had to uphold his pride as a warrior, and after some heated exchange of words with the Duke, Soma makes a request. He asks both Carmen and Castor to agree that if any of them is defeated, their men will become loyal to the conqueror. Finally, Liz cuts her hair while the Dukes are still watching to display her determination in fighting by Soma's side. Juna shows up beside the Duchess, and Soma thanks her for being the reason why Excel was on his side. Liz also assures him that he has the complete support of the others as well. On the day of battle, Gaius shouts a battle cry for his army to begin their surprise invasion of Elfrieden. He arrives with his army at Altamura in Elfrieden, where he commands one of the spineless lords of the city to open the city gates. The man pleads for some more time because the Forbidden Army is split into a group that loves Gaius and another that won't hesitate to crush his skull. For this reason, Julius advises his father to deceive the guard, so he promises not to hurt any member of the Forbidden Army if the soldier lets his army pass through. But Gaius is being such a tricky bastard, and he plans to kill the man once he opens those gates. Meanwhile, Soma has already built a fortress at the entrance to his kingdom, with the aid of Kied's earth magic and the efforts of the other construction workers. Now the opposing army is doing its best to tear down the walls, so they switch from the futile usage of bows and arrows to the employment of massive cannon shooters. Once they fire these, their cannons create dents in the walls of the fortress, and Hal asks Kied to use some of her magic to block the attacks. But she says she can't because she used it all up in building the walls. Just in time, a dark elf named Sur shows up from nowhere and fires an arrow to one of the cannonballs, splitting it instantly. He expresses his gratitude to Hal for rescuing his daughter from the landslide ruins, and that his daughter says she will grow to be like Hal, although that pretty much pisses him off. From within, Ark commands the royal army to charge only towards the cannons, paying no mind to the enemy soldiers. This turns out to be a success, and when Carmen gets word about it, he is surprisingly calm. He tells the fretting generals of his army that their move with the cannons have proved useless, and that he had a better strategy, knowing that he had 40,000 men to battle against Soma's 10,000. Carmen says that he would have to lure Soma towards his army, because it is obvious that Soma was not present in the city at the time of the attacks, as shown by the marked defensiveness of his army. With an evil expression on his face, Carmen asks if everything is set to implement his devious master plan. On the other hand, Gaius believes he's about to conquer the city of Altamura, and his son announces for the soldiers to get ready, but they are shocked to hear war cries, and Lord Weiss returns looking more terrified. He says that he has failed to convince the more aggressive half of the army to calm down, so he offers Gaius some gold dust in exchange for his patience. He pleads with Gaius to wait till the next day to launch his attack, when the shadow of the trees is cast upon the bags of gold dust. By that time, Weiss plans to convince the other half of the army to be in support of Gaius. Eventually, Julius convinces his father to agree to Weiss's plea. It turns out that Weiss is not a traitor of Elfrieden, but has been secretly working with thick cell. He's concerned about the notable amount of gold they might lose to Gaius, but the Duchess tells him that there is some wisdom in buying time with the gold as Soma had planned. However, if Soma doesn't show up by noon, they are as good as dead. While these lovebirds are at dinner, Heed rests her head on Hal's shoulder and tells him that if they can get through the ongoing war, they can get through anything else. Despite her shyness, she tells him to guard her like an egg, ensuring her safety throughout the war. The next morning, Carmen's army is still trying so hard to destroy the fortress, but Keed observes that the enemies have adopted a new formation, and this is good news because it means that they are trying to have a more direct combat, much to the advantage of the Forbidden Army. On the other hand, Gaius and his son return to the spot where they made a deal with Weist, and seeing that the conditions he agreed to had been met, Gaius orders them to attack. At the battlefield, there's a sudden influx of wyverns headed rapidly towards the fortress, in a manner that makes Hal think that they are reinforcements coming to help Carmen's army. Well, a lot has been going on behind the scenes, and the night before, here's what happened. In the Red City, Castor's right-hand man came to tell him that the city had been evacuated and the air forces of other lands were looking to join forces with him, but he was completely uninterested because he was unwilling to share the glory of his rebellion with any other. However, he began to see Soma in a more positive light, although it was too late for him to change his actions. He was concerned about the fact that Soma could spring up a surprise move on him, given the hidden nature of his whereabouts at the moment. While they are still talking, Carla bursts into the room to tell her father that Soma's forces have been spotted, but is surprising to know that there is only one ship in sight. Just then, Soma requests a FaceTime call with Castor, while the ship is being dragged towards the Duke's castle. Immediately, it begins to launch cannonballs towards the castle, and Castor is impressed to see that Soma was able to pull such an innovative move. Soma gives Castor an opportunity to join the winning team, but he says he isn't going to destroy his reputation in such a disgraceful manner as surrendering. Soma bids him farewell, and Castor tells his daughter to silence the damn cannons. With great speed, Carla directs the Air Force towards Soma's ship, with the intention of capturing him alive, so they get into an impressive formation and fire at the ship, but it counters their attacks, much to their surprise. One of the strikers finds that the wheels of the ship are not that strong, so Carla commands them to strike it, although she has it in mind not to strike any part of the ship that could hurt Princess Liz, just in case she's aboard the ship. They're finally able to stop the cannons from firing, but when they get there, they receive the greatest shock of their lives. There are no enemy soldiers in sight, only puppet hands. It was at this moment that Carla understood the game that was played. The ship had been a distraction away from Soma, who was headed towards his main target, Castor. Seeing that Soma has made his way into the castle, Castor is surprised and curious to know just how Soma managed to sneak in. Soma tells him that he found secret passageways by going through the blueprints of the Red City. After the introductions, Castor tells Soma that he can trust his loyal servant Tallman to lead the Air Force in the event that he lost to Soma. Appreciating his extent of care for his staff, Soma gives Castor a final opportunity to surrender, but he draws his sword and tells him that real men do not easily back down. Aisha immediately steps forward with her sword and tells Soma to step aside, but Castor mocks him by asking him to face him directly if he truly is a hero. Swiftly, Aisha swings at his blade with her much larger sword. He evades the attack and calls her a little kid, but she tells him that she has been alive for decades. With a powerful swing, Aisha throws him into the wall, and Castor is impressed at her brutal strength. Aisha tells him that she doesn't mind being a dumb girl as long as she possesses the strength needed to protect Soma. So he wonders just how good a guy Soma is to deserve this level of loyalty. Suddenly, Liz appears from nowhere, launching a surprise attack at the prince and using her magic to surround him in an ice trap. Aisha quickly breaks through the ice with her sword, striking Castor and sending him to the ground. The princess feels sorry for Castor, but he tells her that he fought diligently, and even though he has been defeated, he still retained his pride. He asks Liz if Soma is a good king, and she tells him that he is good to her to the extent that she can fight her father for Soma's sake. As they hear the sound of their battleship exploding, Liz immediately places a slave collar on Castor's neck, telling him that if the collar senses him attempting any harm to its master, who happens to be Soma, it will tighten on his neck and his head will roll. Soon after, Carla walks in and is horrified to see her father lying on the floor in a slave collar and immediately draws out her sword. Liz quickly warns her about the collar and tells her that if she does anything stupid to Soma, her father will pay for it with his life. Soma keeps to his end of the bargain and temporarily appoints Tallman as the general of the Air Force, but under the command of the Forbidden Army. Tallman is ready to serve, although he's curious about what will happen to the Duke and his daughter. Soma tells him that he's going to review their case after the war, but until then, Tallman would have to assemble the force to announce that they are now under a new command before heading to Carmen's duchy. On their way back, Liz begins to say good things about Carla, calling her a good and devoted person, and hinting at the fact that she might have an appealing body underneath the ugly armor she's wearing. Soma gets the picture, understanding that Liz is leading him to spare Carla's life and take her as a concubine, but Soma is concerned about losing the trust of the people by overlooking the crime of rebellion committed by Carla. To back him up, Carla tells Liz not to plead for her life because Soma actually sent them numerous letters to change their minds, but they rejected them. Back to Elfheiden's fortress, as Keed and Hal watch the Air Force coming towards them, Keed immediately knows that Soma won the battle against the Castor. Tallman orders the force to attack Karnan's castle, but avoid touching residential areas. Soma and Hal congratulate each other for being successful in carrying out their plan, although they both face difficulties in dealing with their enemies. Observing their conversation, Carla is surprised to see that Hal speaks to the king in a very informal manner, and Liz tells her that Soma is really cool with it. Meanwhile, Carmen's generals bring reports about the damages created by the attacks of the Air Force and are asking what steps to take against the force which betrayed them. After hearing that Soma now possesses full control of the skies, Carmen sees that his people are basically hostages at this point and realizes that he has lost Soma. His generals, however, do not share the same sentiment because the army is unscathed and they can still use the innocent civilians as human shields while they hide in the castle. These selfish suggestions surprise the Carmen, and he's able to finally unravel the true nature of the generals he had been protecting. He surprises them by having slave collars placed on their necks, so they'll have to beg Soma to spare their lives. Carmen also asks his right-hand man to place the slave collar on his neck and announce his total surrender to Soma. A message got to Soma that a peace flag was raised in Randall, and Soma's loyal followers were amazed to find that the war was over that quickly. Old man Carmen is seen holding an expensive bottle of wine, which was given to him by King Albert. He planned to drink himself to stupor whenever Liz would be getting married, and said that he treasured the gift above anything else, but now he knows he might be captured and never live to see that day. Interrupting his soliloquy, Beowulf bursts in with good news, saying that Soma was not invading the city and only took Carmen's army along with him to a distant destination. This pleases Carmen so much that he raises his bottle in honor of Soma and Liz. Carla is confused by the turn of events, so she demands an explanation from Soma and Liz. They tell her that the entire thing was planned by Duke Carmen. Soma tells her that he never intended to fight the dukedoms, but the only one who was initially on his side was the Duchess by proxy of her granddaughter's relationship with Soma. And despite his lack of support for Soma, Duke Carmen surprisingly had his own secret plans to expose and deal with the corrupt officials in his army, so this worked for the overall benefit of the entire kingdom. He apologizes to Carla because unfortunately, her father was not let in on the secret plan for fear that if it leaked out, Duke Carmen's sacrifice would be in vain. Carla says she understands after hearing that Carmen had placed his life on the line for all this to happen. We're back at Altamora with Gaius and his foolish son. They're planning to teach Weist a lesson, but they see someone climb onto the wall, and Gaius is surprised to see that it is the Duchess. After a while, he figured that she probably had been there the whole time and was in close contact with Soma. His son quickly understands that they've been set up and tells his father that they have to retreat immediately. Suddenly, Excel creates a portal which broadcasts Soma as he announces that he has won the Civil War and is now in full control of all the armed forces. He also exposes Gaius for exploiting the conflict to his advantage by trying to seize control of Altamora as the battles ensued. So he declares war on Gaius and tells him that the Forbidden Army is headed towards the Amidonian capital Van to burn the city to the ground. Word gets out to the Princess of Amidonia that her father's army was ambushed on their way back to defend the city, and half of their men were taken out by the Forbidden Army. Julius and Gaius, however, managed to recover an additional number of soldiers from the surrounding villages, but by the time they arrive at the capital city, Elfheiden has already conquered it, hoisting their flags and banners everywhere. Seeing this, Gaius is utterly dismayed as he thinks that the whole of Van has been conquered, but his son spots the castle and notices that there are no Elfheiden flags there, so he commands them to get rid of the Forbidden Army. Soma loves the sound of this because it means there will be a head-on attack, so he commands the army to engage them, and Ark orders his men to get into a special formation. The battle begins, and the opposing armies fight with so much brute force, but Key changes the game when she uses her magical powers to entrap some of the Amidonian soldiers in an earth barricade, while Hal throws a fiery spear toward the soldiers. All the while, Soma is deeply concerned about something, and Carla wishes to know what bothers him so much, so he tells her that he feels that if things get really bloody, he might have to throw his pride away and plead for the lives of his men to be spared. However, he has noticed that lately he has been acting more like a king, even though he feels like a coward for disliking the idea of bloodshed. In this light, he decides that he has to stop acting like a temporary king and assume the position of the fully instated king. On the battlefield, Gaius realizes that he has made a terrible mistake by sending his already tired soldiers into war, so he tells Julius to make a run for it because they have been defeated. Even though Julius is hesitant to leave his father's side, he eventually escapes the battlefield with a group of soldiers. Soma is alerted that Gaius is charging directly towards him with a smaller army of elite fighters, although the main army has retreated. He then tells Carla that he would be resetting the slave collar's master to be Liz, and his final will, in the event that anything should happen to him, is that Liz will be the next ruler of the kingdom. Carla refuses to yield to such a dumb request because she can strike Gaius down if Soma orders her to. So Soma gives the order and she takes off. Ark sees the army approaching and aims his spear towards Gaius, but when he looks closely at the body, he realizes that he had been tricked and that it was just a body double. Carla, on the other hand, quickly spots Gaius and launches the opening attack. He easily defends against it, causing them to be in a deadlock as both are equally strong. But suddenly, Soma's puppet appears from nowhere and lands a blow on Gaius, which is quite hilarious to him because he doesn't understand how a puppet is supposed to defeat him. That instant, Soma tells Carla to step aside, and when Gaius draws nearer to him, Soma controls his puppet to block the attack with a strike, while at the same time instructing Carla to see the puppet on fire. There's a loud explosion after Gaius is set on fire, and Soma runs to check if Carla Karla's okay, but she's upset that he's on the battlefield, exposing himself to getting killed, which would cause so much grief to Liz. Shockingly, Gaius comes out of the fire and still charges towards Soma, even though he's not really in the best shape. As he approaches, multiple arrows are fired at him, but it doesn't stop him from throwing his sword at Soma. Luckily, the sword lands just a few inches away from Soma and doesn't harm him, and Gaius finally gives up and falls dead to the ground. Soma is impressed by the valiance displayed by Gaius and his warriors, so he says that their story should be included in their history books. Princess Rora is given the sad news of her father's demise, so she gets some time alone and sheds a few tears to mourn her foolish old man. The next day, Liz finds out that Soma had actually been planning to take over Amadonia for quite some time, but is surprised that he managed to keep the casualties at the border to a minimum. He says that he was advised by Hakuya not to evacuate the villagers living at the border for fear that the Amidonian troops would easily figure out his next move. He then tells her that he planned a fake attack of fiery monsters to scare the villagers away, so they would have to leave the area without actually making a formal evacuation. Ark informs Soma that Rora had left the city with the finance minister and some officials, and Julius left with some soldiers towards the west, so Soma requests for some bureaucrats to lure the officials back to the land, because they were relevant in the development of Amidonia. Next, Pancho reports that the Amidonian treasury didn't possess enough stored food, but rather possess an abundance of weapons. To this, Soma says that the weapons will be sold while food will be rationed throughout the country until things stabilize. If there still isn't enough food to go around, he will have to ship some from their own kingdom as a matter of urgency. Another official reports that the Amidonian soldiers are in good spirits, and this would ease the conquest of other cities of the kingdom. But Soma says he wouldn't be capturing any other city because he wasn't ready to handle too much trouble from the Empire. In fact, he already knows that they are coming for him because he breached the Mankind Treaty made to unite humans against the Demon Kingdom by using military power to capture the capital city of Van. Because Amidonia is a signatory to that treaty, the Empire may go to extreme lengths to recover it from him. Liz wonders why he still didn't sign the treaty after knowing what would happen, but he tells her that the declaration came with a secret catch that could break up the Empire in the future. Since the war, there has been so much hatred and negativity towards the Elfiden Kingdom, so Ark wonders if Soma has planned anything to ease the tensions. Coincidentally, Soma summons Juna, and she looks really hot in her Navy uniform. He then tells her that he invited her to carry out the next phase of his plan, a project called Lorelei. Later, a newscaster is seen on the broadcast, and she says she will be bringing news about daily events going on in the kingdom of Elfiden and its environs. It seems like Soma has organized some form of entertainment show next up, because Aisha is clothed in a pretty dress, which makes her a little uncomfortable. When Soma appears with her on the screen, the people of Amidonia are amazed to see that it was such a young man that had defeated Gaius. Soma goes on to announce that they're hosting Elfriden's first musical show, then he introduces a young girl on stage. She performs her cute little song, and Juna is the next person to present. While Juna is performing, Soma pulls Aisha to tell her that he has invited a surprise guest to sing next on stage, but he wants Aisha to watch his back. Without hesitation, Aisha beats her chest to say that she will watch over him with her own life. Soma awkwardly turns his face away after seeing her plot cannons bounce like that. Juna's performance really pleases the crowd, and Soma invites his surprise guest to perform. He introduces her as Lieutenant General Margarita of Amidonia, who will be performing the Amidonian national anthem. The crowd is shocked, and a brief moment of silence ensues. But as soon as she starts singing the anthem, they all pledge in respect. As soon as she finishes, she tells Soma that he can now chop her head off. However, Soma surprises her by saying that he has no reason to, and she can't believe it because the Amidonian anthem is basically about a song about seizing their stolen land back from Elfiden. Still, Soma tells her that Elfiden has no such silly laws against the anthems of other countries, and that a good country was one in which everyone could freely sing whatever they liked. Meanwhile, Soma's prediction about the Empire is about to come true. At the forefront of the Mankind Treaty is the Grand Chaos Empire, led by a very beautiful and sweet-natured lady called Maria, who is also known as the Saint of the Empire. Now Maria's sister Jean tells her that she's heading to the captured city of Van to negotiate with Soma for the release of the city, so that they can maintain the prestige of the Empire. After his recent conquests, we're back to a lot of paperwork, and our hero realizes that he has excess burdens to bear following the recent acquisition of Van. The good news, though, is that the people of Van have a newfound interest in bouncing back after numerous years of oppression. Rora sees that ever since power was seized from her father, the people have had a sense of freedom like never before. She's pretty sure that they won't allow her brother a chance to the throne, and all of this is thanks to Soma, because after his motivational speech at the broadcast, he set out to lower taxes and increase the circulation of goods. She, however, plans to make Soma pay for what he had done to the capital and to her family. Soma is informed that there's an army headed in their direction, so he asks to be updated if anything comes up. At that moment, he is joined by Pancho, who brings him a beguiling lily plant which has some hallucinatory effects, but most importantly possesses the lily roots, which were food items of tremendous value. However, in order to harvest the roots, people made use of orangutans, who were known addicts to the hallucinatory effects of the lily plant. Soma asks if there are any orangutans in Amidonia, and Pancho tells him that there are, and he has already contacted Tomo to negotiate a deal with the orangutans, where they will be given barrels of weed in exchange for their manpower in harvesting the lily roots. After organizing everything, Pancho also prepares some stew with the lily roots and serves it to the people, giving them some to take home as well. Later, Soma, Luna, and Tomo are in the market, and Soma wears a hat to conceal his identity. When Tomo runs off to go shopping, Luna pulls him closer and holds onto his arm, assuring him that he is well protected and safe with her. She suggests that they go shopping for his adopted younger sister, Tomo, and when they get to the shop, he tells the little girl to pick whatever fancies her. Luna follows her and picks some pretty dresses for her, but Soma picks an ugly pair of shoes, so the minister uses a military analogy to tell him that men and women bargain differently, so Soma gets the hint and leaves it all in Luna's hands. Soma asks why he had to use a military analogy, and he says that lately, he has had to deal with a charming but cunning little devil, which we all know to be the Princess of Amadonia. After shopping, Tomo is seen wearing a really pretty dress and has a bag filled with more clothes than she can carry. She's delighted and grateful to her older brother for the present he gave her, even though the shoes are quite ugly. Soma also presents a ladybug hairpin to Luna, and she becomes flustered as she thanks him. Luna tells him to get presents for Liz and the others, and he tells her that he got a present for everyone. He also tells her to skip the formalities and to call him by his name, so she leans into him and calls him a naughty flirt. They stop by one of the stalls to grab a quick bite, and Tobo falls asleep on Soma's thighs. A few minutes later, a newscaster forecasts that the weather would be sunny in both Elfriden and Van, making it perfect weather for them to do their laundry. Suddenly, a female voice from behind them says it is amazing to see the gemstone broadcast being used so innovatively, and when they turn, they find that it is Jean Euphoria, leader of the Empire's military. Seeing that her guards have overpowered his, Soma tells her that she must be brimming with so much audacity to have casually walked into his territory. Luna stepped forward to protect Soma, but Jean said she meant no harm as she only came to confirm if all the rumors she heard about Soma were true. She tells him she heard that Soma was a wise ruler who had turned the economic situation of a bankrupt kingdom around, who devised a long-lasting solution to the food shortage problem by using creative means to prepare appetizing meals that people generally did not like. After that, says that she also heard that he was a pathological womanizer who, despite being engaged to the former king's daughter, was still gathering the kingdom's most beautiful women and creating a royal harem with them. Luna isn't surprised and even giggles because she had also heard the same rumor, but our dearest hero is speechless to know the sort of reputation he has. Jean tells him that if the rumors are false, then her plan wouldn't work because she planned to use her beautiful sister to plead with him to release the kingdom of Amadonia after hearing about his weakness for beautiful women. Soma is surprised that Jean was willing to use someone as reputable as her sister, who was even known as the Empire's saint, to pull off such an act. However, Jean tells him that her sister doesn't like being called a saint because she is anything but a saint. Maria, however, doesn't mind the title if it has a desirable effect on young men like Soma. Hearing this, Luna comes up with her own silly title, Songstress, and asks Soma what he thinks of the name. After a while, Jean tells Soma that he is an amusing king who gets along really well with his officials, which was enough evidence that his kingdom was really stable. Jean tells them that for the same reason her sister Maria is being called a saint, although everyone is kept a healthy distance from her. Also, Maria is deeply invested in her duties, that she treats everyone equally, and this is the reason for her involvement in asking for the release of Amadonia, because otherwise she has nothing to gain from helping them. Jean thinks the news broadcasting thing is cool, so she asks for Soma's permission to do something similar in her country. She wonders how he was able to come up with such an innovative way to use the gemstone broadcast, so he tells her that it's actually a pretty common thing in the world which he comes from. Immediately, Jean bows to Soma, apologizing on behalf of the Empire for summoning him from his world. Soma tells her that he knew that the Empire had no need for a hero, and he was only summoned to serve as a human sacrifice on behalf of Elfriden. The kingdom of Elfriden was not a signatory to the Mankind Act, but they were somehow beneficiaries of it. However, due to the dwindling state of their economy, they couldn't afford to contribute as much as the neighboring kingdoms, so they had to summon a hero as a sacrifice to the demons, just to make it seem like they were actually doing something serious. Jean says that no one expected the hero's summoning to work or for things to get better for the Elfriden kingdom, but Soma had proved them wrong. Now, all Soma wishes to do is to protect his newfound family, and he hopes that Jean will accept his jurisdiction over the land of Amadonia, but she says that she also has a family to protect, so Soma tells her that they would have to negotiate in order to arrive at a compromise. Jean says she hopes he will take it easy on her and immediately turns to leave. Somehow, it feels like the so-called negotiations wouldn't be as easy as expected. When they return to the castle, Tomo excitedly shows the ladies her new dress, and Soma gives Aisha the lipstick he got for her. Aisha is excited about her present and hopes to become more feminine for her darling king. As Liz watches all this, she burns with envy until Soma gives her a beautiful necklace, which looks really good on her. As Soma watches this family sharing joy and laughter, he strengthens his resolve to protect them at all costs.